Hello everyone, it's Sheila and this is my very first storytime video. Um, for probably, I don't know, like the last several weeks, I've been on and off watching a lot of storytime videos, and I just kind of felt like, I have a few stories behind my belt, and I think I can share these stories and maybe it would help you possibly get to know me better or help you in a situation that you're dealing with or, whatever. So anyway, you can tell by the title of this video, it probably sounds a lot worse than it really is. So I was married to my son's father. He was my high school sweetheart. He was my first of everything. And when we got divorced, I was devastated. I went through a lot. And it was really, really hard for me to date. For a long time, I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. Like I couldn't bring myself to be involved, if you will. So, one day I actually went out to the mall to look for something, and then I realized that they were having like this jazz thing that they have all the time at the Crossroads Mall. So I ended up kind of like walking through that area, and I'm sorry, my necklace is kind of doing a thing here, isn't it? I ended up walking through that area just to kind of browse and, just kind of see who was out there. And for me, that was like really, really brave because I am not a person, like I'm getting better at it. I've been practicing it a lot more in my older age, but at that particular time in my life, it was like really brave of me to do. I don't generally go to places by myself. Like I just don't. And so, like a place like that, like being in the mall, I was okay, but to walk through like a crowd of people listening to music, it was almost like a concert environment. Like that's so not me. So anyway, I went on and walked through, and I remember looking up because I was kind of on the lower level, and I remember looking up, and there was this guy standing up there, and I was like, he was kind of looking at me, and I, got very uncomfortable, and I just kind of like walked really fast, and I like walked away and kind of forgot about it. Well, then a few minutes, I don't know, like a little bit later, I was getting ready to like leave, and I was kind of like walking back in the direction, and I thought, oh, there was one other store I wanted to go in, so I went in that store. Well, when I came out of the store, there he was. And, he said hi, and I said hi, and we ended up making small talk, and he mentioned that he was from the area, which is outside of Austin, and I was like, oh, okay. And then he said that's where he lived now, but that he does a lot of work here in San Antonio, and he was actually in San Antonio for a seminar that pertained to his business. And I said, oh, okay, we just made small talk, and then he asked me if he could take me out to dinner, and I was like, like I kind of wanted to, just because it felt good for someone to ask me out to dinner. But then it was that part of me that was kind of like, I don't want to do that because I don't know. And so this was a time that my son was away at his dad's. So I had free time, if you will. So I thought, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I said yes. And we exchanged phone numbers. We met for dinner. Of course, I wouldn't let him come to my house to pick me up or anything like that. We met for dinner the next day after his seminar, and had great conversation. And, we shared our stories, if you will. I told him I had been divorced for a few months now. I guess like it was almost a year, maybe, or something like that. Like it was, or maybe it had been a year. I think it had been a year. And so, yeah, you know what? It had been a year. So, and then he shared with me that he was divorced, and he had the story that he told me. He said that he was divorced, and that the funny thing is that he has a child that's like a baby girl that's like 4 months old. I think is what he's 6 months old, 6 months old, 4 or 6 months, somewhere in there. And I kind of looked at him and I said, I don't understand. And he said, well, it's weird because my wife and I separated, and then we ended up trying to get back together. And in that midst of trying to get back together, we created a baby. But it didn't work. So now I have 3 children instead of 2. And I have this newborn, that we share custody of, obviously. And so it kind of scares people away because, a man with a newborn and like that young, you're like, why are you divorced with a baby that young? But he said, the truth of the matter, the relationship was at its worst. And for some reason they felt like, I think they thought they were doing it for the 2 kids that they already had. And, story sounded convincing, sounded believable. I was like, oh my God, someone have my same kind of like life, like the feelings or whatever. I don't know. Like I felt comfortable at that point. So, and I think I felt that I wasn't threatened because he didn't live like he wasn't so far away that I couldn't see him, but then he wasn't someone that would be in my life every single day. And I know for a fact I wasn't ready for that. So he went back, did things, and my ex was still living here at that time. So my son was back at home, and so we did. I went on back to my life, doing things with my son and, taking care of my son. And, he'd call and then I'd be like, we'd talk on the phone. And then he had to come to San Antonio. He was in the AC business. He came to San Antonio to do a job. And he called me, he's like, hey, I'm coming to San Antonio. I would really, really love to see you. And so I was like, okay, I guess, I was like, well, and my son was actually, at the time with my son, it was a little bit easier because he was going back and forth. And so it wasn't like, he wasn't there all the time. So again, this was a time when, this was a weekend that my son was over at his dad. So I was like, okay, this is perfect. So I went, oh, wait a minute. I think I got the story so wrong. Like, wait a minute. Was my ex still living here? It's happened so long ago. I can't remember, but I know my son was not with me at the time, obviously, because I would never, I was very serious about raising my son. Like, I never would let my son, like, a man would not interfere with my son. Like, I would only, go out on dates and stuff when my son was either at his best friend's house spending the night or if he was away in the summer with his dad when his dad was moved away. But when his dad was living here, every other weekend, I had my son. So I can't not remember for the life of me. I feel really weird. Like I think because part of me wanted to just shut that part of my life out so much that I kind of tried to make myself forget it. There's something flying around in my house. And so anyway, it's beside the point. My son wasn't there. So anyway, so we went out and we had, dinner was great. And I loved his company. We just had so much in common. He made me feel good. It was just a great experience. And so I was like, I kind of like this guy. And then we kind of saw each other on and off like that. Like there were a few times sorry about that. But anyway, so there were times that we would meet in San Marcos. We would kind of meet because that was like our halfway point. I worked in New Braunfels at the time. And so I could get off work and I actually had a friend living with me at the time also because she was going through a divorce. And so when we would meet in San Marcos, sometimes my friend would be like, if it's, I'll, go and do this and I'll just hang out with Terrell for a little bit and give me a little bit of free time, where I didn't have to feel so like I'm deserting my child, because he would enjoy little weird things that they would do together. So so that would happen sometimes, and over the course of probably 2 or 3 months, this was happening, and it was getting to the point where I was kind of really liking this guy, and so then it was a weekend that my son was going to be gone, and so we had planned that I was going to go spend the weekend. So I went to
self-destruct sequence activated,
and I did the checkpoints, just because I think in my head, it's like, I just want to make sure. I just want to know what's going on. So I did the checkpoints. I saw no women clothing anywhere in the house. I didn't see I'm like, okay, there's a sign that nobody lives here but him. It looks very manly. And I mean, the kids' rooms obviously had stuff in them, but I looked in his closet and there was no female clothing. I looked in the guest closets and there were no female clothing. So I was like, okay, obviously, she's gone. So I kind of reassured myself. I was like, yes, this feels good. Like I like this guy. And so the next morning, he woke me up. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. He's like, I have this beautiful day planned for us. I want you to know that I really, really care about you, and you've been through a lot in your life, and I want to show you that you deserve better. And so we went out and had breakfast overlooking, I know we were on some mountain. I don't even remember the name of it. It was beautiful. We picked up breakfast. We sat out on a blanket. We had breakfast, watched the sun come up. It was such a beautiful, I never had an experience like that in my entire life. It was just beautiful. And I was starting to think I really, really like this guy. So the holidays were coming. It was going to be Thanksgiving. And he and I had kind of talked about, like we wanted to take the relationship to the next level. Like we wanted our kids to meet, and we wanted to meet each other's kids and to get to know each other a little bit better in a family type of an environment. So I was like scared at first, but I was like, I think it's time. I've never introduced a real guy to my son before, so this is going to be different, but I think I can do it. So we planned this beautiful Thanksgiving dinner. He was going to even bring the baby, and he was so, I guess, to put it in his words, like, I'm so happy that you're willing to have the baby as well, because he said, he knows that that's a big step, like for a woman to want to embrace a newborn, basically. And so I was like, well, it comes with the territory. So, I told my son, and Thanksgiving morning, we got up and he and I started getting the kitchen ready. And my son used to love to do things for the holidays to make him feel so manly, And so they showed up and, opened the door, and I was like, oh, yay. We hugged each other and we introduced everybody. And the kids seemed to have a little bit of a niche for each other. Like they got along. It was a daughter that was closer to my son's age, and then a 3-year-old, and then the baby, which was a girl. And so we introduced each other, everything, they seemed to get along. And I was like, well, dinner should be ready. We're going to eat probably in an hour and a half or so. And so it was just like everything going along. Well, then my doorbell rang. And he had told me that his ex-wife was going to be in town because her family lived here in San Antonio, or she had family in San Antonio. And so he said that, later on he would have to take the kids over to her. And I was like, that's no problem, I understand. And so the doorbell rang, and I opened the door, and there was a woman standing there, and I go, oh, hi. And I kind of figured it was her. And I said, hi, how are you? And I said, and I said, hi. And I kind of recognized her. I didn't recognize her from a picture or anything, but I guess I felt like it had to be her. And I said, hi, you must be X. And she said, X. And I said, okay, maybe I have the wrong person. I'm sorry. And she goes, no. And she goes, but I'm not an X. And I said, oh. I said, well, I'm sorry. And, I was kind of like, I didn't know what to say. And so, and then it went ugly. Like it was like, I don't want you anywhere near my kids. And she started yelling his name. And I turned, and then he had like this blank look on his face. And at that point, it hit me. Like, because I think at first I still was thinking like, okay, maybe it's one of those situations where, she's not wanting to admit that it's done, sometimes, because I was there at a point, like I never wanted to say he was my ex because I still wanted him to be the husband. So I understood how that type of emotion could happen. So I'm thinking at first this is what's happening. And then I realized when I look over at his face and he has this like completely drawn blank look on his face. And I remember my heart just sank. And so I turned to her and I said, look, obviously this is a bad situation right now, but it's probably good that the kids don't hear, because my son was very on point with anything. So at this point, my son was standing in the middle of the floor like, what is going on, mommy? And so I was like, and I went to tell him to take the little girl, and go upstairs. And she said, don't you touch my children. And I said, look, I said, hey, I don't want to be the cause of anything bad here. And it obviously sounds like it is bad, but let's not get the children involved. They don't need to hear this at all. And so she proceeded to yell. And then my son, knowing how I think, he grabbed her hand and they just went upstairs. And so I just got to the point where I couldn't speak. I was just like, and so he went outside with her and they closed the door and they were outside for, I don't know, I want to say 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I know it was a long time, or maybe it just seemed like a long time. I just know they were outside for a long time. And I was inside and I was like, I was crying. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? What is this? I don't know. And I was just like inside going over and over in my head, all these things. And so then the door opened up and he said, I need to get the kids things. And I said, okay. And so the little girl came downstairs and I kind of helped real quick gather up his stuff and their stuff, and my son is asking me like 1,000 questions, and I'm trying so hard not to cry, not to, and I was just like, and my son was like, Mommy, I don't know what's going on. Who is the lady? And, and why are they leaving? And I was just like, they need to go, baby. They need to go. And so he went to say something to me, and I just looked at him and I just went, don't say anything to me at all. Like, there's nothing you can say to me right now. Absolutely nothing. And so then he like turned and just walked out the door. And I remember sitting down and I called my best friend and I told her, I said, look, I said, I don't know what just happened. And I kind of told her, and she was like, okay, get your son, get Terrell, and you guys gather up some of your food, and we're gonna put our food together, and you guys just come over here, and we're gonna have a great Thanksgiving, and we're not gonna think about what just went on. Like, we're just not. This didn't happen. Don't worry about it. So I did, and the drive over to our house, my son was asking so many questions, and I was just like, I don't. I'm trying to answer him in a way that he could understand, but not like, it was the most horrible experience ever. So he tried to call me, and then I remembered that I had left my diamond earrings at his house, and my diamond earrings were like pretty much like the only thing like that I had that was of value at that point, like, because I during my divorce and all that, I got rid of a lot of things, and I had these diamond earrings that I absolutely loved. And so I was like, I want my diamond earrings back. So I picked up the phone and I said, look, I said, you and I have nothing to ever say to each other ever again. But if you don't mind, I would like to get my diamond earrings back. And he was like, well, let me explain. I said, no. You can explain. I said to him, I said, you portrayed yourself as being divorced. You portrayed yourself as being a single man. You took me into your home. Like, you lied. You've caused me to be with a man that was married, and I didn't know. So what do I look like right now? And he was like, but I told her you didn't know. And I said, it doesn't matter what you told her, because women don't believe that. Like, they don't. And obviously she didn't, because for several, I want to say 2 or 3 months afterwards, I would get a phone call. She would be breathing heavy on the phone, and then she'd hang up, or she'd say something like slut, and then just hang up the phone. And the funny thing about it is, this person was an attorney, and that part was true. And they were still married, which was true. And I come to find out that they did live in separate places, but they were still legally married. So in my mind, it was, I had been betrayed in every possible way, because had I known that, I could have made decisions based on that. Basically, I would have stayed the heck away. So, but one of the times that she called, I just had enough, and I said, look, don't you dare hang up. You have called my home. You have interrupted you. First, you come to my home, which rightfully so, because it looks pretty bad, because I was there with your legal husband. But the truth of the matter is, I truthfully did not know that he was your husband. And once I found out that he was your husband, the only contact I ever had with him after that was to meet him to pick up something that was mine. And I have never spoken to him since. I put it behind me. I would like to apologize to you for my part in it, even though I did not know that you existed. I never did anything to harm your children. That was the first time I'd ever seen your children before in my entire life. And I proceeded to say, I've been told, and I don't know if it's true, if you are an attorney, you are a highly viewed woman in a lot of people's eyes. And I would think that you would have better sense to know that your behavior right now is wrong, because you're treating me in a way that, which I know you probably may not believe it, but you're treating me as if I did all of this myself. First of all, had I known you exist, again, I would not even have given him the time of day. But I did not honestly know that you existed. I did everything humanly possible once I found out you existed, and I walked away. Like there was nothing left. I mean, I heard in silence, but I never contacted him, nothing, past getting my earrings back. And so she was listening, and I said, so I'm gonna ask you to please leave me and my son alone, because every time you call this house, you've called it when my son's answered the phone, you've called the house, and my son can sense that something's wrong. I've had to explain to him something that I never wanted to explain to him, and try to make it in a way that he would understand. And I've been placed in a very bad situation from him, and now you're placing me in an even worse situation because you're harassing me. I don't want him. I don't want any more contact with him, and I would prefer that I have no more contact with you. So I'm begging you, please, please leave us alone. And she listened for a few minutes, and then she said, is what you're saying true? And I said, yes. And she says, I think I believe you. And I said, well, please do. And she said, I won't call you again. And we hung up the phone, and I never spoke to her again, and I never heard from her again. And it took me so long to trust again, because that was my first step out into the world that I had never even been in ever in my entire life, because I'd only been with my husband or ex-husband. And so it devastated me. It tore me apart. It made it so that I did not want to even, when a guy would say that he had been married, he was divorced, I didn't want to believe him. I was just so afraid to believe. It really, really hurt me. And I think, I guess if I wanted to ever get a message out to anyone out there, because I've been watching several, like I said, a lot of the Storytime videos, and I hear some of the things that people do when they hear about their husbands cheating or their spouses cheating or whatever, and how they confront the other person, and how, I really want to say everything isn't as it seems. In my situation, I probably looked guilty as heck to the outside world, but I was innocent as possible. I had no idea. So it was a bad situation that I was in, but I wasn't the cause of the situation. It was the lies that were causing the situation. So, if you're ever faced to a situation like that, don't overreact. Don't be so quick to think you know the story, because I'm living proof that the story may not be as it seems. And, it really made me have a whole different look on life as far as, situations, because it taught me something. Because, I think maybe even myself before then, you kind of think that if it's happening, everybody involved know about it and they're all guilty. I don't, so, but anyway, so that's my story. And the funny thing is that my friend that had lived with me for a while, one day she was in the Dallas area, and she'd gone to the state fair, and she saw his wife, and their 3 children. And she was like, he saw her, and because he had met her. And I'd taken him to a couple of places where my friends were, so a few of my friends had even met him. And she said that when he saw her, he kind of like looked at her, and he like turned his head and kind of put his head down. And she said, I made eye contact with him. She's like, Sheila, I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see me. And she goes, I know, I just wanted him to know, like, I see you. And she said they were together, and my thoughts were, well, maybe they were able to mend their marriage and get back together, and hopefully he never will do anything like that to her again. I don't know all the story. I don't, maybe they had agreed to live separate lives and their divorce wasn't really final. That's what he was trying to tell me the day that he gave me my earrings back. But I didn't really care. The lie had already been told. The truth should have been told from the very beginning. And then I could have made a decision based on what the information that I was giving. But I made a decision based on a lie. So it was nothing he could say at that point that could make me feel better, understand it, or want to even be a part of any of it. So again, I hope the story kind of helps you. If you've ever been placed in a situation like that, or if you ever placed in a situation like that, don't be too quick to judge or to assume that that other person knows everything that's going on, or that person set out to deliberately hurt you. And the harassing of the other person, is it necessary? Does it solve anything? Does it get you, what does it get you? What? Tell me, because it got her nothing, because she was harassing a person that was no threat to her. And so I would never do that to anybody. What's said and done, once we have the conversation and it's out, leave it alone, let it go. And so that was my story time. It was a time in my life that I tried so hard to put behind me, yet I at times try to remember certain things about it because it reminds me of just how people can be. And sometimes you do have to have a reminder, because in life, those reminders are sometimes what keep you from being put in other situations at other times, if that makes any sense at all. So again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in my very next video.